So there I was. I woke up with a heavy case of amnesia in the middle of nowhere. The only clue to my past is Harry's name and address inside this hat. So I made my way to the apartment, and that's when I found you and your stapler gun.
Stop talking! You're a hallucination!
You're a hallucination.
So you're a talking Pikachu with no memories who's addicted to caffeine.
I could stop whenever I want. These are just choices. Another round, extra shot, black as night. Thank you, sweetie. I don't know. Maybe Harry got in too deep. Mixed up the wrong crowd, that kind of thing. Look, you can talk to humans. I can talk to Pokemon. And if you want to find your pops, we're gonna need each other.
No, I don't need a Pokemon.
What about a world-class detective? Ah, my clues!
What is all this?
Harry is still alive. Case closed. But still open until I solve it.
Welcome, one and all, to the Film Board from the Next Reel on rashpixel.fm. We spoil movies, and this month we've gathered some thugs to comment on the craze that is an industry unto itself. We're talking about the world of Pokemon here on Mother's Day weekend because Pokémon Detective Pikachu was released in theaters this past week, and with Ryan Reynolds voicing the historically fan-favorite Pikachu, there might be a reason for everyone to see this thing, whether you are someone who's got to catch them all, or even if you found those seemingly aimless hordes tracking invisible monsters on their phone through the Pokemon Go craze, a teensy bit ridiculous. That craze is over, right, guys? Nobody plays that game anymore? Clearly, this movie is going to have an audience. We gathered the appropriately relevant thugs here today to connect the adorable photoreal dots for us on this one. And let's start by introducing them. Do you have a favorite Pokemon, Pete Wright?
I'm glad you asked.
I see.
My personal favorite wasn't even in the movie.
Oh no!
It's my ginned up T-Tar that I'm pretty happy with.
T-Tar.
Oh, my Tyranitar, JJ,
Wow.
my Tyranitar. Now I started late, so just even getting one of these things was hard enough for little old me. But my goodness,
You started doing what late?
playing Pokemon.
Pokemon Go, right?
Yeah. Oh, I'm in it now. I'm in
Okay,
it now, and I would like to say, not my fault.
No, and that could be the fault of one Andy Nelson, right?
It could be, but I'm gonna pin it back on my son because it's his fault, really.
Blame the youth.
He got me started. Yeah.
So, who's your favorite Pokemon, Andy?
I learned it from watching him. Oh my! I have a few favorites, and one of mine was in the film, so I was thrilled. Mr. Mime, who I just adore.
Wait, that seems
so
like
much.
an odd one to have as a favorite.
I love him. He's great. But I also like Blossom. I think Blossom is just super adorable. And Politoed and the Alolan Executor. And also one of my favorites is the shiny version of the Ho-Oh. I just love the way that looks.
Too. I like the bird.
I do.
Pokemon.
I just have to say, because Andy dropped so many names, I have to say my second favorite is actually in the movie, and it is the Machamp, and it was directing traffic in the movie. And the reason that one is so close to my heart is because when I was a brand new player, Andy took me to my very first raid, and it was a level 3 raid with the Machamp in it. And he said, I'm gonna solo this, and you're just gonna dodge, and that's all we're gonna do. And then you'll get a chance when you're like level 7, and you could get this thing. Andy essentially gifted me my first Machamp. And as those experts in the game will know, the Machamp is an all-around power hitter. He's a utility player right there. And
he's a good fighter. Right.
That is from Andy, so he's very close to my heart.
He's your legacy ringer.
He's my legacy ringer. That's right.
Well,
and the Machamp is super creepy when it's played by a Ditto.
Totally.
Yes.
And can we just say one more thing? I watched a really interesting video about this. The way the Machamp looks, did you know this about, he's got the little underoos, got the little thing and
Definitely.
the belt.
Yeah.
So
he's kind of a swimmer. Yeah.
I was watching a video with the director of this movie, and he was asked the question, what's the weirdest note that you got from the Pokemon company as they were watching this movie? And it was on the Machamp's wardrobe. They said, you have to know, Pokemon don't wear clothes.
Yeah.
And the director stopped and said, okay, well, what are you saying? And they said, well, that the underoos and the silver belt are part of his body.
What?
Yes, and that means your Mr. Mime that looks like clothes. That's like what his body looks like. They are all essentially naked, and that has been blowing my mind all day.
I've never thought about that.
So Snubble's not wearing a little pink coat either.
No, he's not wearing a pink coat either. Yes.
Snubble. I love it. So I'm a particular fan of Eevee. And the reason why I like Eevee so much is because it has this ability to evolve into just about any Pokemon type. So you can change it and this kind of thing. And when I have played Pokemon Go, which hasn't been for a little while for me, but a lot of the people that are on top of, what are they called? The shrines or the things around town that you're trying to get to the upper levels on, you've got a lot of the big bosses on there were evolved Eevees. Like they'd have Flareon and Vaporeon and all these different things, Jolteon here and there, which I think is really cool. So now that we've dropped 36 different Pokemon in the first 10 minutes of our podcast here, I think we've established that that we all have playground cred for attacking this topic. So let's talk about the movie, which I'm glad we're already jumping into. What are your first thoughts here, Andy? What did you think of the movie?
I had fun with it, but I didn't have nearly as much fun as I was hoping to have with it. I think that it ended up being a very light movie. And, my wife and I were talking about it afterward. It felt like perfect for my son's age. He's 8. And I think they were very purposefully avoiding going to that PG-13 Marvel range. I think they were trying to keep it in the realm for the younger crowds. Yeah. But the frustrating thing for me is that Disney does that a lot, and they come up with some really fantastic stories. And I felt this overall story, while it did have some heart, and I did enjoy the actual story itself, I just felt it was also pretty played. Like I felt like I'd seen this story countless times. It wasn't anything new or that exciting.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely with you on the light part. I think that was surprising that it was that way. And I think when I heard Ryan Reynolds attached to it, I thought it was going to have a little bit more edge. What did you think of it, Pete?
I went into this movie knowing what I wanted to see. I wanted to see the eye candy, right? First and foremost, I wanted to see the eye candy. I thought, let's see what they do to bring these creatures into the photorealistic world, right? And I got that. After that, I go see it for Ryan Reynolds because he's a property I know very well, and I think his delivery is unique and enjoyable and funny. And I did laugh at this movie. But to echo Andy's point, this was enormously predictable, and not just because it was heavily lifted from the 3DS game Detective Pikachu. Like, this was predictable around every corner from the very first frames, as we're looking at the chase and we're looking at the first flashbacks and we see the Mewtwo, and they're just, I think I got the stories too quickly. I didn't feel like the mystery of the detective gave me anything to latch on to. And so by the time, we get to the Batman ending with the gas coming out of the
Batman
parade floats, right? The Bat Dance parade.
Right. Yes.
My heartstrings were not pulled, and I wanted them to be pulled. I wanted to have some sense of heart. I'll tell you what I wanted to have more than anything was the Lego Movie ending. That's the surprise I wanted, and Lego Movie bowled me over. They used this fantastically frivolous Toy Story to set me up for something I absolutely didn't see coming. It was just crushingly good.
Yeah,
as a dad and as somebody I'll stop talking, I swear, but as somebody whose like central investment in the Pokemon universe is with my son,
sure,
I feel like this movie let me down. Also, he loved it.
Yeah, same with my son.
See, and I think that's really interesting. You bring up a lot of good points with that, and I think it really is a kid's movie. And I didn't expect that going in. One thing that you mentioned is how closely related it is to the Detective Pikachu game. So I read an article with the scriptwriter here, and I don't know which one because they have 4 different ones listed on the movie, but he said that when he was hired on to do the movie that they didn't have a script yet but they developed the game at the same time as developing the script for this movie. And they had already had a head start on the game, and it was always the plan, literally from the Pokemon Company, always the plan to have them interrelated. So they are direct counterparts, and it was a way to
That's interesting.
see it in two different media to figure out how they were going to do it. So that's the thing to there. And I think, so for me, I think it was really a kid's movie. I think Andy's point about it being light and the fact that your son loved it, I think this is a really solid movie for kids. And I just didn't expect that going in. So for me, it ended up being pretty thin, like you guys are saying. But when if I take a step back and think about what it can be for kids, I think some of the twists and turns, the fact that it's kind of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit meets Batman, which I hadn't considered that, before. It's kind of a cool thing for kids. I don't know that the younger kids are going to have an idea of the twists and turns in this story. I think it's good for them, but for the seasoned adult movie viewer, it's going to feel like very predictable, right? Because these are all different things that we've done before.
Well, and let me just, as table stakes though, JJ, let me just ask you, was the Lego movie a kid's movie?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well,
to Andy's point, like they can make good, deep, heartfelt kids movies, and this wasn't that. Like no. I think that is not a fair apology for this movie. This is a product movie, and
yes, it is.
That's what it is. Yeah.
So it's fine.
It felt very like something you'd get 10, 20 years ago, and I felt like the story development for family entertainment has come a really long way, thanks to really the growth of just kind of the animated marketplace starting in the 90s, where it's not just Disney. Now everybody's competing, and generally they're pushing for much higher, kind of content. And I don't know. I was just expecting this to kind of be hitting for that higher mark as well, especially being such a huge franchise. But to Pete's point, I think it unfortunately does end up feeling like a product movie.
Yeah, I feel like that way too. And quickly, let's just go through what the story kind of is. If we look at a synopsis, we start with "in a world," right? Like this is the first time I've ever done that. We've been doing these synopses for 2 months, and I haven't done the "in a world" yet, so I want to do that.
I just heard a booge.
See,
that's what I just heard.
I have new headphones, so it sounds really good. Okay, anyway, in a world where there are Pokemon everywhere, a kid named Tim is called to a place where Pokemon and humans live and work together because his dad was a detective there and was killed. So Tim doesn't have a relationship to Pokemon, but in following his dad's footsteps, Tim meets his father's Pokemon partner, Pikachu, which everyone should try to say 10 times fast, who, in a twist on this particular universe, Tim can speak to. And the Pikachu can speak to him too. And they team up to find out all the other crazy twists of his father's peril. It includes sinister experimentation on and mind control of Pokemon in a science fiction plot to merge humans with Pokemon forever. So there is a thick, spoilery description of what happens in this movie. But one of the things that I found interesting about this world is that they're all Pokemon, but there's no animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not the same way in the animated Pokemon movies, is it?
I have no idea. I've never seen any of those. I should ask my son. But, I feel like that why are they going to bother putting animals in? Because their focus in those is just so much the story of the kids with the Pokemon. I mean, I've read some of the books with my son, and kind of the comics, and it is just Pokemon and people. Because, I mean, look, there are birds, there are cats, there are tigers, there are dogs. It's like, why do you need other animals when there are all these other opportunities to just have it designed this way where it's Pokemon and people?
Well, and I think that gets to a really interesting point about what are Pokemon in the Pokemon Company's eyes, right? Are they giving animism to animals and then other people like Mr. Mime, or are they? Which I think, from what I understand, Pokemon comes from a conglomeration of the words pocket monsters, right? It's this spiritual thing that's alongside us everywhere we go. What do we think that the concept is from the Pokemon Company looking at this world?
I was asking my wife about this because I was like, okay, so the Bulbasaurs, because she was totally in love with the Bulbasaurs, the sound design on their cute little cooing. I mean, everything was adorable with them. But I'm like, okay, but in the game, you evolve a Bulbasaur to an Ivysaur, and then you evolve the Ivysaur to a Venusaur. And so I'm like, so if you don't evolve a Bulbasaur, does it just does it always stay a baby, or does it grow up and then it's an old Bulbasaur that never evolved, or would it, in growth, does it naturally grow into an Ivysaur and a Venusaur, but the evolve just makes it go quicker? And it's like, I don't know. It's a concept that I don't really understand. I mean, that's like the most obvious one, because they look like it could grow from one to the next. Whereas some of them, it's like, there's no way that came from that if it's just growing, without having gone through some crazy metamorphosis. But yeah, it's a strange, I don't know. It's a strange concept.
It's a really strange concept. And it's one they don't invest any time in giving you a sense of how the rules work, right? I think the real scene that cements this for me is in the battle. And this movie is deeply short on battles, and the game is deeply heavy on battles and the battle mechanic. But as soon as you put these fuzzy creatures in a cage together and watch them fight, then you realize, oh, right, so this is just like dogfighting, but with, a mouse and a fish. Like, it's kind of gross and horrific when you think about it, and it's like gross and horrific at a different level if you stop too long to think about it in photorealistic, like, big screen. And so I get the very fine line that they're trying to walk, but the rule mechanic, I think they stepped too far away from it, because, we walked out with some big questions. My kids, they're looking at me like, what? So wait a minute. The Magikarp, which we all love, turns into Gyarados, and then what? Like, they just left it in a basement. Like, does it turn back? Can it only evolve one time? Like, what is the mechanic? What is the rule set that they're giving us in the movie? Because they didn't give us enough. And why didn't Pikachu evolve into Raichu at any point when he's already?
I was totally expecting that in the climax.
Totally expecting that in the climax, and I feel like that was a letdown. So I don't know. It's puzzling to me. I don't get why that is, and that one of the major central mechanics in the film, in the game, is catching Pokemon. We have one shot in the opening sequence of the movie where a character attempts to catch a Pokemon in a Pokeball, and then it's over. But wouldn't you guys argue, like, that's how people relate to Pokemon, is by catching them?
Well, but you're talking about Pokemon Go now, right? I mean, I've never played the 3DS Pokemon Detective Pikachu. Hasn't the game, like, you got to collect them all? Aren't you effectively catching Pokemon even with the cards? Well, see,
isn't that the metaphor?
That's the underlying thing about the Pokemon world, or the Pokemon company. But that's the reason why in the article I read that they were addressing the fact that Pokemon Detective Pikachu was the first movie. Why was this the thing? Is because so many people are wondering why it isn't the original storyline with Ash and the Pikachu, and talking about the mechanics and doing all that stuff. And I think we don't have a studio answer for that, and definitely the scriptwriter isn't going to tell us, but it feels like they were trying to do something that was a little bit more bookended with this sort of like maybe a niche part of the universe that's a completely different storyline that they could put into an encapsulated movie. I find that very strange, because I think that, from the animated movie perspective, which I've seen a number of them with my kids, I think they do it really well in sort of exploding this universe and talking about the methodology and the mythology and everything that they do, and not using Deus Ex Gyarados, right? I think they
which is awesome, by the way. I loved seeing Gyarados all that.
I thought it was great too.
That was so cool.
Great for that scene. But I think, it's maybe, is this just a showcase of what Pokemon could be in a alternate realm sort of thing? Or because it's clear that they were avoiding having to tell the story of the mythology and how this works in this particular movie.
They kind of left a lot of that out. And I don't mind so much that they didn't give you all of the backstory. I like having the sense of this world that's here, and I felt like they actually, I don't know, I'm really curious to talk to some people who like Tommy and JJ, who have never really kind of followed anything Pokemon related.
JJ's here.
Tommy and Steve, sorry. And get a sense for what they thought. And is because my sense coming off on this is somebody who's never really followed it to go, okay, it's a full world and I kind of understand it for the most part. But, again, I think it ends up falling on the story because I just think the story was weak. If it was a much stronger story and it didn't feel like just an opportunity to like put all these Pokemon in a movie so that people could see it, in live action, I feel like they would have served themselves better rather than the way they did. Because, it creates an interesting world, but to that end, it's like, I don't know. You start questioning all these things about these rules because there's just not enough story to really care about.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the people who haven't seen it, because I think that's why they chose this. I think they thought it would be easier to tell this small story than explain the entire mythology of this entire game world that they've created to those people who haven't seen, who haven't been exposed to the universe at all.
The other thing that I think they neutered is our central protagonist, Tim. Like, I went in expecting that he was going to have to have been gifted with certain tropes. For example, that he not only had wanted at one point a career in becoming a Pokemon trainer, but that he was essentially had sort of retired from that world, right? I was not able, I never understood his reticence to engage in Pokemon. That was not earned.
They never explained it to us.
It was puzzling. And then he gets into the underground fight, and we have that line, when Pikachu looks at him and says, "Hey, since when did you become a Pokemon trainer?" Because he does. He knows a lot about Pokemon. Doesn't that indicate that he should have had more substance to him, more of a background, more of a story besides, my dad didn't, my impression was my dad didn't love me very much. And that was just sort of empty and hollow. And as a result, I felt like I had nothing to hang on to and be dragged along behind beyond the flash of the colors of the Pokemon on screen. And that was fun and funny, but only for really so long.
I think you're right. And I think that, that what I compared it to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where they are very deep in telling us why tunes are not liked by the people who are following in the story. And here they just skipped over it. You mentioned the color and the photo reel and everything that's there. Was it, I don't know that it needs to be real. I should say that, but did it feel real? Did you feel like these furry, fuzzy, wonderful, adorable creatures were in the universe with these live action characters?
I did. I thought they did an amazing job of bringing them to life. They had just some beautiful creations of these different Pokemon wandering around. And that was the world building that I really, really loved. Just kind of these great wide shots of a cityscape as you see, like a Dodrio walking by, and you see some little, couldn't tell which kind of birds they were, but kind of flitting through the sky. And you see little panda creatures, and you see kind of, I don't know if it's a Registeel or a Regirock or something, kind of standing on a corner, and Machamp and Snorlax sleeping in the corner. Right. And, they did a great job of creating these characters and making them feel like they were really present in this world. And all the, like the Growlites and just the Articunos and everything. And like, they found ways to kind of, tap them into the place that just, I don't know, it was just beautiful. I thought that for me was well worth watching on the big screen, despite the fact that the story didn't quite work for me as well as I wanted it to.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like that's a thing about this movie, that it is, it's just a massive Easter egg, for those who are invested and who know about the story and about Pokemon. I feel like there are going to be layers to peel back in this movie every time I see it. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to see it again in the theater. I don't really have a reason to, but we'll certainly watch it again and just look at the little touches that they put in this thing. The entire city was fantastic, and then you go into his office, right, into Bill Nighy's office, and they have the beautiful like Art Deco sculptures of Dialga and Palkia and what's the third, the trio. Anyway, they have them behind his desk in this just wonderful pose, and I thought that was so cool. Like just seeing how invested the art direction was in being a part of the world. I thought it was really great.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about Endgame being really sort of focused on fan service and doing it gracefully. This is maybe brand service, right? They made sure that those Easter eggs for the Pokemon world were put there. One of my favorite parts about Pokemon is that they all they ever say is their name. I think it's adorable.
Right.
Like I want to hear it in all the animated things. That wasn't consistent in this film. Or was it?
I thought it was pretty consistent.
And I couldn't hear it. I mean, like
they just didn't say it all the time. But like Ludicolo in the bar was
great. So great.
Ludicolo.
Well, and Jigglypuff karaoke was probably my favorite cameo.
What a fun Easter egg that that the guy was sound asleep next to him. I thought that was so great.
It's perfect. Well, and I think, you mentioned this being for the fans. I think this movie really is for the kids. My theater was loaded with kids. It was all kids going to this movie, and it's a PG movie. So I think that was perfect. There were some questionable trailers at my movie, though. Did you guys have they did a Godzilla King of Monsters trailer before my movie. Yeah. It was really scary. I mean, some of the kids had to turn away. They were freaked out by it.
Well, it's PG, and I think that's going to always be the dilemma when you're dealing with these rating systems and having to go, okay, well, it's PG, so we can put any trailer on it that's PG or lower.
Is King of Monsters PG?
Well, the trailer. I mean, they're cutting the trailer so that it's.
I see what you're saying.
It's green band, right. So it's safe, even if it's PG-13.
I didn't understand.
It still ends up being safe. Yeah.
It seems really odd. It seems odd that they would take that leap. And there were kids that like had to turn away, and their parents are like covering them up through it because it was that scary for them. So that was unfortunate.
Well, and to that end, maybe they should have considered a G rating for this and just gone the safer route. But it
was close. The story is really. You mentioned it was light before it there isn't a whole lot of drama other than Tim's father has died, and then there's some snarky dialogue. Is there anything else that brings it from the script perspective to a PG rating?
I was thinking about it, and I think that the fact that they're essentially kind of torturing these creatures in cages, I was like, that probably is another reason that it would push to a PG.
Yeah, because I don't know that happens in the TV show at all. I don't think they go to that length at all, and the experiments and that kind of stuff. That's pretty intense. Right. Yeah. What did you guys think of the story? I mentioned that I thought it was twisty and turny. I realized very early where we were going with the end of it, who Ryan Reynolds is going to be. But I think kids, I think it's a good sort of reveal for kids. I can't wait to talk to my kids about it and see what they thought about if they knew what was going to happen towards the end.
I totally missed the Ryan Reynolds reveal.
Oh, you did?
I didn't pick up on that. But as soon as Pikachu essentially gave the whole thing away for me, because as soon as that black vehicle drives up and he's like, oh, that's a bad guy car. I'm like, oh, okay. So that means Bill Nye's our bad guy. Right. I didn't even need to know any more of the story. He told me right there. Totally. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's going to be the story.
Yeah, I mean, who thinks who is too dumb? Like, I think kids can pick up on subtext better than maybe the brand producers believe they can.
And I think there was an error in the first scene with Pikachu when Tim meets Pikachu and he's being chased by all of the first feral Pokemon.
The Apoms.
Feral Apoms.
The Apoms, yeah. So as he's running from them, I think Pikachu calls his name. And it's before he knew his name. Because later on in that scene, they established that it's not that he doesn't know who he is yet. He's just kid. So I think it's interesting because if you look at where the story is going, where there is the big reveal that they're connected in that way, I think, and maybe it's done on purpose, but it was something that was just kind of glossed over in a very sort of action laden part with the feral Pokemon. So I don't know. It felt like an error to me for sure.
Interesting. I didn't catch it at all.
I didn't catch it. That's really interesting, especially if it was like if it was an early nod to what's going to happen, or to how his sort of pairing has been done.
One surprise that one thing that I thought was a nice surprise was the Ditto twist that we had later, which I feel like I should have seen coming, but because we do see the Ditto earlier when they're at the TV station. But I don't know. That was a great surprise when all of a sudden the the Ditto appears. I was like, oh, of course it's the Ditto. I enjoyed that.
And
twist.
you'd never think that the Ditto was going to be the son, right? I mean, that's
right.
And now wait, was the enforcer woman that was part of that? Is that a nod to Team Rocket?
Oh, interesting.
I don't know, because
she's not credited as that in the story, but I feel like because she's wearing all pink and she has this pink hair and stuff like that, I think that's the bad guy team in the animated series. But she never says a word because it's always the Ditto.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't be surprised if they're throwing Easter eggs like that.
I love it.
I love it.
And opportunities to throw people off.
Yeah. Right. Right. Which that definitely was in that case. And talk about another creepy thing. Ditto eyes on human beings.
That was so gross. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The production design was so good. Yeah.
Oh, geez, that was so creepy. I loved that so much. That was, I thought, one of the coolest villain just special effects I've seen in a while, because it was so simple, but it was so creepy. It was so creepy.
I hope my kids are going to be able to sleep through it, because thinking back to Coraline with the mom spider that has the button eyes, that my kids still, years from seeing that movie, still have nightmares about that. So I'm concerned with the pupilless eyes effect on anything in a movie that they're watching.
Or pupil only eyes. That's all it is. It's just a pupil right there.
Well, Ryan Reynolds is partly the reason why I was super excited to see this movie. And I think I always like him. He's so likable. I mean, even just his voice is likable, but there just wasn't a whole lot that he delivered in this movie. There wasn't a whole lot of script for him to give. Definitely for, that comparison, Pete, that you're talking about to the Lego movie, where they really gave all the characters this sort of layered dialogue and it's a layered story. That wasn't this. He was just pretty straightforward jokes too, didn't you think?
And most of the jokes came out in the trailers too.
Yeah.
That kind of bummed me out.
Yeah, I think part of it is he has a patois, right? He has a banter. He has sort of he has a tone that I expect and like, and it's something I can latch on to, when I don't have, story. And
okay.
Since this movie is story light, I just like hearing his voice. I want him to read me the news in the morning. I really do. I feel like that can't be understated, because that's part of the sale of Ryan Reynolds in this movie.
Well, and I think that's part of the sale of why we find any attachment with the characters also, because you need kind of somebody whose voice you can connect to so quickly and easily to play a role like this, because it requires you to find that emotional connection between Tim and Pikachu as their relationship develops. And it relies on some pretty key beats to kind of find that connection for you. And in order to get there, I feel like if it wasn't a Ryan Reynolds voice in there, I would have had a much more difficult time really feeling that connection had been formed between them.
And I agree with that. And I think Justice Smith is fine, but for the first 2/3 of the movie, he really was just portraying sort of exasperation. I feel like there wasn't a whole lot. He, as a character, wasn't written in a way that would lead us to that intimacy until we start finally getting the turn of him making this emotional move. And so, in effect, I didn't particularly like him. I was always attached to Pikachu because of that familiarity. Did you guys have any specific feelings about Justice?
Well, he was fine. I liked him better in Jurassic World. I liked him a lot better in Paper Towns. I feel like he didn't. There was something about his interaction with the digital creatures that didn't feel quite as authentic consistently.
Yeah.
And so I struggled a little bit with that, because it just makes this feel, I don't know. I don't want to just bag on his performance, because it just like Ryan Reynolds, they do with what they are given, and I think he did with what he was given.
Yep.
Well, that's my sense of it, because I think Justice Smith is a fine actor, and I think they can both deliver strong performances. Likewise, Ken Watanabe or Bill Nye, any of these people, they can deliver when they have a stronger story. And I think it all falls on the story here. I mean, it feels like such a rehash of this type of story that we've seen so many times before. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing to kind of revisit kind of those kind of story beats again, but at least give me a sense of something with the characters so I can get a sense that there's really something going on here. And I just don't think that these actors were given enough meat to really make their performances into something special.
No, I almost feel like their characters were written like their cartoon counterparts, where they were very thin and very sort of direct in their emotion without the sort of layers there. So it wasn't there. And I think that, I mean, you mentioned Bill Nye, you mentioned Ken Watanabe, and Catherine Newton playing the sort of the buddy reporter for Tim here too. I really liked her performance, but it was pretty single-noted because it was, you know, it reminded me a lot of what you see in the cartoons for stuff like this.
I think a better, budding reporter is Anna Faris in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Yes.
So much more fun, so much more just
better written
story given to that character. Absolutely.
Again, kids movie. I could not agree more. I think every one of these characters, the big shocking characters, Bill Nye, I wonder today if you walk up to Bill Nye at a presser for something else and you say, hey, do you remember that Pokemon movie? What are the odds he remembers that he was even in it? Like, it just opened, and I don't believe he would remember that he's even in it.
I feel like he's one of these guys. Like he takes so many of the strangest, these big franchise movies. Like, didn't he pop up in the Underworld series?
Yeah. Yes, he did, which is totally on our list sometime in the future.
Yeah, I mean, he signs up for some. He has a movie coming out later this year called Stardog and Turbo Cat. I mean, he does strange things, and I think a lot of it is just for fun.
You
I
may
think
be
he's just
defining
doing a lot of crazy stuff just for good times.
You may be defining the other reason why he doesn't remember that he's in this movie, even though it just opened this weekend. I want to name
Stardog and Wondercat.
I would like to name a list of movies right now. All right, if I may, a list of movies, and I want you to tell me what they have in common. Can we play this little game?
I love it.
All right.
Okay.
Gladiator.
Mm-hmm.
Hannibal. Kingdom of Heaven.
So far, Ridley Scott.
Oh,
okay.
Kingdom of Heaven.
So far, all Ridley Scott. How about August Rush?
Oh,
that's not Ridley Scott.
How about Robin Hood? How about 47 Ronin? How about The Man from U.N.C.L.E.? Logan. And Pokemon Detective Pikachu.
Oh,
well,
I know
it's
this one.
Somebody who works a lot with Ridley Scott.
Yes, I know this one.
I don't know.
I think
without looking at IMDb, I know it's got to be one of his key crew members.
Well, it is, Andy. You're an astute observer. It is John Matheson. I think a lot of my joy in watching this movie is at the hands of John Matheson. What did you guys think of him as DP of this one and how he treated this thing? It feels to me, looking at his list, it's largely out of context, but he's certainly done some fun movies that are kind of out of character.
Well, yeah, and you throw, I mean, some of the X-Men. He did X-Men First Class. He did Logan. Yep. I mean, so he certainly is.
But again, Logan was out of character, right? For a superhero movie.
Well, and I think
so.
What we mentioned in terms of the CGI, what's doing with this photoreal stuff here, I think he did an interesting job with the camera to feature that. So it was very clear that it was always organized well ahead of time, that really you mentioned Logan, you mentioned X-Men First Class. There's a storyboarding, a paneling in this movie too, which gives that brand service what it's looked for here. I didn't remember a camera move in this movie that I was particularly shocked by, but the things that we liked about this movie was because the camera embraced them and showed it to us in a way that I think was important.
Allowed the frame to be positioned in such a way where you could catch them.
Exactly.
That's something I always think about in movies like this, where there are a lot of or big or both digital creatures that have to fill the frame, having to frame the camera in such a way where you have a ridiculous amount of space around your actor that seems almost uncomfortable when you're leaving it just without any effects in it. And I imagine for DPs it can be difficult sometimes, where it's like, okay, well, I've got to move it a little more to the left and I've got to frame it a little higher because there's going to be this big thing over here.
There's a 13 foot tall sea monster that's going to be in the middle of this cage.
Right. Well, and a good
Good luck.
example of that is the Machamp, right? When we get the Machamp fight scene from the Ditto, that you mentioned that this is this powerhouse of a Pokemon. You have got to make room for it and then show it in an action way. I thought it was all visible and all wonderfully shot.
I think they could have done some other fun things with it. To me, it felt safe kid movie production. It didn't feel like anything super creative. But yeah, otherwise, I thought the cinematography was fine. I thought it fit. The one thing that I wish that I had more of is in a detective film, I really wanted them to play more with noir looks to it.
Yeah.
Just give me some more of those real kind of contrasty shadows throughout. And I get it. It's a kid's film, but still, you have the opportunity to do that. And it could have been
Pete, were
fun.
you saying that you've played the 3DS game, the Pokemon Detective Pikachu game?
No, I spent quite a bit of time watching clips of it.
Gotcha.
First of all, after you've seen this and go watch clips of the game, it's just wrong. Like not having Ryan Reynolds' voice in there is just wrong. Sure. Very, very different Pikachu. And I think actually weirdly, it's probably more noir. Like it's like, it's kind of a lower, gruffer voice, which is
that's what I was wondering.
Strange.
Yeah, I mean, because Andy, asking for that, like maybe that should have been appropriate to do that here too.
Well, and I feel like they were on the cusp of something cool, right? Like they had some of those cool sequences and some of these great locations that could have led to more of a celebration of detective movies. I think they were there. I did like though that when he went into the apartment and there was a detective movie on TV.
Yeah.
That was so great. That was I can't remember what it was called, Angels in but it was the one from Home Alone. Yeah, it was like Angels in the
Angels
something.
It's not Angels with dirty faces. They called it Angels. What was it?
Angels with filthy souls.
Yeah.
Another person that's really prolific associated with this movie is Henry Jackman doing the music.
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed at what he does. I mean, he's 4 to 6 movies every year. I like his music a lot. On his list, I see tons of movies that I really enjoy in the soundtracks of. My favorite by him is Big Hero 6, actually, a kid's movie as well. How is he so prolific? He's going to be, we're going to look back and look at his filmography when he's all done, and it's going to be staggering, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's done some great stuff. And, I think the music was fine here. I don't know if there was anything I was expecting to hear as far as like tying in some themes from the shows or games or stuff other than Ryan Reynolds kind of, half singing one of the songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was fine. I thought he did a fine job, and I think he's been an interesting composer who's done some interesting projects for sure.
Did you guys have anything other to say about your movie experience with it? It's winning the weekend. I mean, I see that even on the first night, it made I think $60 million. To Avengers Endgame $16 million. So it's taking over, which is great for this movie. But my theater wasn't filled, and again, it was all filled with kids. Was there anything specific about your theater experience that was remarkable?
Just that there were a lot of adults.
Oh, really?
In the theater. Yeah, I had a lot of adults in the theater. I mean, there were, and not just adults with kids, but adults on dates and adults in groups and adults. And a lot of them were playing Pokemon Go. Like
I was just going to ask you that. Were they tossing Pokeballs as the game was playing?
Yeah, I mean, just the lead up to the movie. And so it was just, I mean, that stuff was kind of fun. And we should say, like, it might be interesting. I don't know, Andy, you'll hear about your theater experience too, but I think it's worth like at least talking a little bit about the brand tie-in between the movie and the game, not just 3DS, but Pokemon Go, because they're making a big deal about it.
What are they doing?
Well, they have featured, they're featuring a lot of the Pokemon that were featured in the movie. They're featuring in the game, even those that aren't around very much. So you want to catch a fully evolved Charizard? Now's your chance through Friday of this week.
Cool.
You can find these that are very rare or hard to get.
Is there a Mewtwo?
I haven't gotten a chance at a Mewtwo. I haven't heard anybody report that they've seen one, but
I don't think that would.
Yeah, they're only available in raid battles.
Yeah. but it's interesting that you can see, you're seeing more of these that were, windowed, months past are showing up again, which is kind of fun. God, if I see another APOM, I'm going to close my head in the car door.
Andy,
they are as prolific as they were in the movie.
Yes, they are.
Andy, what was your theater experience like?
I saw it in 3D, which was it was the time frame that we needed to hit to see it, which was fine. I thought it looked they did a good job of creating it in 3D, particularly when Tim has kind of the fainted Pikachu and is following the Bulbasaurs and the little floaty mushroom guys. That looked really nice with all those little guys floating around.
It looked like it was designed
in 3D. That was beautifully done, really beautifully done. But I do just have to say this, and I hope our listeners take it to heart and really think about this when they go to the movies. So I am a particular person about people talking during movies, and I've never shied away from shushing people. Which I ran into tonight.
Did you get in a fight
this afternoon? No. Nothing quite like that. We threw down on Pokemon Go and had a battle during the movie. No, so it was right at the beginning of the movie, and it was a mom sitting with her son, and her son kept talking to her during the movie, and she kept talking right back to him, like full volume. And so I just, I shushed once, and then they kept going, and I just leaned back and I said, "Would you mind not talking during the movie?" And she looked at me and said, "It's a kids' movie." And I said,
"Teach them
that
right.
shouldn't matter. It's just manners." She looked at me and said, "If my kid wants to talk during the movie, he can talk during the movie."
Oh, jeez.
And so I said, "Well, fine. Then if you keep it up, I'll just go report you to the theater
authorities."
And because I shouldn't have to put up with that. Nobody should have to put up with that. And I hope listeners of our show, certainly appreciate that and aren't the type who talk during movies, or at least appreciate it if somebody asks them to be quiet. Oh, yes, you're right. I should use my manners when I watch a movie. And, I will say they didn't talk anymore during the movie. So it worked. But still, it's like, come on, people. Like, really? This is how you're teaching your kid?
Same. So
it was
not the
very
exact same thing, but during the Bill Nye exposition scene, there was a mom and a daughter sitting next to me in the theater, and the daughter's phone was going off with some ringtone that was like current mumble rap. And because the mom didn't recognize it, because it was a song, nothing happened. Like the phone played through the entire scene, and everyone around me was like looking for it. And it was so odd because it wasn't super loud. It was like in a purse, right? So everybody's like, wait, is this background music? But you couldn't really tell like why. It felt so out of place and so weird. And finally, like the girl realized there's like, oh no, that's my phone. So similarly, like, yeah, it's a kid's movie, but come on. Yeah. I had the same experience. So I missed a little bit of Bill Nye explaining that he's the bad guy to everybody else.
You didn't miss much.
Well, now that we've got our grumpy old men comments out of the way, if we have nothing more to say this movie, I think we should rank it. We've got all the movies that we've talked about on this show ranked over at flickchart.com/TNR film board. Flickchart is a really cool site where you can create a tournament style stack ranking of your movie preferences. So check it out and find out how your film favorites fare against ours. Andy, do we know if they're still looking for support over there?
That's a good question. I have not checked their page in a while, but they were. And if they are, the Flickchart team is they're doing. It's like a Kickstarter type of thing to kind of get a little more money to get the version 2.0 of their website up. They need a little boost to get that.
I haven't seen any advertisements about it. I had only heard it through our Discord and our discussions about it. So that's why I wanted to ask you, because I hadn't seen it.
Yeah, I'm sure they're still looking for support, and we can certainly put the link in the show notes for people.
Where do we start with Pokémon Detective Pikachu?
First up, we have Pokémon Detective Pikachu, or the Predator. There's two I'd like to see in a battle ring. I have to go with Pikachu here. It's so much more entertaining to watch and didn't want to make me slam my head.
Oh man, I got so mad at Predator. I can't. Of course, I'm not.
So did I.
I'm glad that you guys are saying that, because on my personal flick chart that I made that choice too. So I'm Pikachu as well.
Yeah, Detective Pikachu or Rogue One. I will take Rogue One.
Rogue One for sure.
Rogue One.
Detective Pikachu or Ant-Man. I will take Ant-Man.
Ant-Man?
Yes.
Detective Pikachu or Avengers: Age of Ultron. Wow, we've talked a lot of the MCU. I'm going to go with the Ultron here.
Ultron for me too.
Detective Pikachu or Snowden.
Ooh, I'm going to say Snowden.
Pikachu is a just beautiful film to watch with all the characters, but Snowden gives me a little more meat. They both feed different appetites, but I'll probably pick Snowden.
I kind of got mad at that too. I should say, I kind of got mad at that too.
That's a great
I don't think, since mine doesn't really matter, I would be Pokemon on this one.
Oh, that's awesome. Right. I hope Oliver Stone is listening. Next.
Detective Pikachu or The Dark Tower.
Oh, weird.
I abstain. This is the one film board movie that I never saw.
No, we got to change that.
Oh, interesting.
I caught up. Yeah.
Well, I was the one who is more in favor of The Dark Tower because I've never read any of them. Yeah. But even still, I would pick Detective Pikachu because they're both pretty forgettable. Yeah. But Pikachu at least gives me the joy of the characters.
Two very thin movies. I'm going to go with Pikachu as well.
Yeah. Well, that lands Pokemon Detective Pikachu at slot 39 on our chart of 81. So it's just barely over the 50%.
And only because of Predator. But yeah, I would like to hear
it. Yeah, it's like 3 slots above Predator.
For me, for Letterboxd, I actually went with my algorithm from my personal flick chart, and I gave it 2 stars and a like. I'm saying it's a like because I think it's not for me, that there's a different audience, but I it's just 2 stars. My algorithm actually told me to do 1.5, but I can't condemn it that far. It's 2 stars and a like for me.
I feel like I'm the same. It's a very, unfortunately, just flat movie. And it didn't involve me as much as it should have. But I'm at 2 and a like, but I think I'm actually going to give it 2.5 just because it's so beautiful to look at consistently across the board.
I'm with you guys. I mean, it ended up at 737 out of 1,082 on my list, which, according to the algorithm, should be 1.5 stars on Letterboxd.
That was me too.
I feel like I'm going to give it a 2-star, and I'm definitely giving it a heart. I mean, I'm hopeful. I leave this conversation hopeful. There are 809 Pokemon currently in canon. And even still, I feel like the hero Pokemon that they chose, this movie ends up feeling, even the stuff I really love, the like visual stuff, can start to feel a little bit repetitive. I feel like I have hope that this is just the first, because I think this is a fun way to present these characters. I think I have hope that if it is successful, maybe it will start to give us an opportunity to see something that isn't quite so brand heavy and has a little bit more substance to it. I believe it or not, I am enthusiastic for the future of the Pokemon live action franchise. That's a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
But my son got a lot of joy out of it. I enjoyed watching it with him. He was super excited at the end reveal. And I think that, I think there are good people doing good work to make this franchise comedically satisfying. And even though it fell a little bit flat in this first time out, I'm looking forward to number 2.
It's a tricky story to revisit with a number 2 because you can't really go down the same road.
Well, and
they've kind of ended that.
I guess I don't want to say number 2, but I think there is room to explore the universe of Pokemon. Not maybe outside of Detective Pikachu, but maybe there's an Eevee story, maybe there's who knows, maybe I just think there
are reporter side
exactly. Yeah.
Well, similar to the comic book realms, there is a lot of great original content that they can pull from here, and they don't necessarily need to do a sequel to this movie, but they can make another Pokemon movie that could be satisfying in a different way. So I like that you're optimistic.
In 10 years. we are going to come back and we'll be talking about the Deadpool-esque rated R Pokemon movie that gives us the gym battles we've always wanted. Pokemon get burned and eaten in those things.
Oh my goodness.
And we're going to feel it in the jellies.
The jellies. I actually like that. That joke through the convention worked for me.
Too.
And I like the payoff for that one too. It if we compare this movie to Happy Time Murders, which had a bunch of jokes that paid off in a really terrible way. This
See, now I missed that episode,
comedy,
and we didn't get to rank it. How would you rank this next to Happy Time Murders?
Oh, it's so much greater.
Absolutely better.
So much greater. Yeah, a whole world better.
That was
Happy Time Murders. Was terribly unfortunate. So this, and it was going the other way, right? It was a complete adult way of making a movie. But this, this humor, while it was light for us and didn't necessarily hit, it at least had strategy and it paid off in a good way, I thought. So where do we go from here? Next month is June, and we are looking to try to do Yesterday, the new Danny Boyle movie coming out about the Beatles music and an interesting way to enter in the world. I'm really excited for that movie, both personally and for here on the show. Where are you guys at on the series, the main show? What are you guys doing right now on the next reel?
We're in our Ingrid Bergman series. And let's see, by the time this comes out, we're getting ready to release our episode on For Whom the Bell Tolls.
And I saw there was some Sat-Mat voting about movies with bells tolling.
We were really, we were pretty broadly reaching.
Let me just say,
options.
broadly reaching my butt. We nailed it. We nailed it on bells tolling.
I'm just going to say good luck with that one. And then Testing Andy, as always, where are we right now in the Marvel Movie Minute?
Well, we are actually getting close to the kind of the climactic build of the film. By the time this should be released the same day as, I believe, episode 92, which would be minute 92 of Iron Man. So, getting right in the middle of it all. It's fun.
You at home can find out more about all of that and engage with us on our Discord server. Go to thenextreel.com and scroll down to the section that says "Want to hang out?" in it. That's us just being direct, trying to get everyone into the party. There are links under that heading that connect you to our fun film family where we discuss lots of remarkable things from throughout the entertainment universe, and there's also specific chats about all of our shows. So come join our gang and interact with us on Discord. That's where we'll keep the conversation going. But for this one, say goodnight, Pete, right?
Good night, everybody. Wait, Ludicolo!
See you later, Andy Nelson.
What would the ho-oh say? Ho-oh! I don't know.
At the next reel, when the movie ends, our conversation begins. Till next.